Ports face total shutdown nationwide. See page 5.
She overwhelmed by security challenges.
Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. Here on Today in the News,
we read and give in-depth analysis on some of the stories on the front pages of the paper.
Also take your insightful comments of what's going on here in Nigeria and across the world. Join us Mondays through to Friday
on Vanguard Live.
Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Precious Chukudi and I have with me
Damlola Oshake.
Alright, this morning, before we move straight to the papers, when I heard the 8 people who died in Port Harcourt, as a result of, struggling for Christmas palliative, I was really saddened, and it just speaks so much of how much, poverty is, on the increase in the country. People do not have food to eat. What do you make of that situation?
I think, I've seen the photo story on the front page of Vanguard, and it's just so saddening looking at the lady that are just pouring water on. And, the crowd just there, it's just saying that this Christmas, we have a lot of people who have not had anything to eat for this festive season. But we're just talking a lot about the economy in Nigeria and what people are currently going through. Many of us might not know, but people are really hungry there, and this is just showing what is currently going on.
All right, let's just move straight to the front pages of the papers. We're starting off with Vanguard, and the main headline says, pay ransom, free our children from bandits. Parents beg federal government. The rider says 17 students found, says Masari. More students appearing from the bushes. Masari's aide is saying that one. We thought the bandits were policemen, SKP. Boko Haram claims responsibility for Kankara school kidnapping. Teachers threaten to shut down schools. Zamfara shuts boarding schools. Also, we have a photo story of the Christmas palliative stampede. That's some survivors of the tragic stampede yesterday during the distribution of Christmas palliative by a non-governmental body yesterday. A very good, thought, people giving out palliatives or stuff for people who do not have anything for Christmas, and then it turns to a very tragic incident.
Yeah.
Also on page 6, 8 dead as Port Harcourt residents rush for Christmas palliative. On page 12, I was George Ashley before 2015 election, Jonathan. On page 9, World Bank approves Nigeria's $1.5 billion loan request. On stories beneath, we have Nigeria must restructure before 2023 polls. Makinde is saying that one. On page 9, we have 774,000 special jobs. Rep asks federal government to suspend program. You can see that on page 9. Lastly, on the front page of the Vanguard, we have COVID-19 vaccines must undergo local clinical trials. NMA is saying that on page 26. And away from Vanguard, we move straight to the Punch newspaper.
And on the front page of the Punch newspaper, we have a mass abduction. Student recounts near-death experience before escape. Abducted schoolboy is divided into batches. Boko Haram claims their responsibility. Bandits assisted me to escape. That's coming from a GSS student. And Zamfara shuts boarding schools. ACF decries federal government's lamentation, says Nigeria not secure under Buhari. You can see that story on page 2, and stories below on page 9. Amotekun says we've arrested 120 suspected criminals in Ondo. I think that's a nice step been taken by them. Also on page 7, Nigeria needs security restructuring, not Yoruba presidency. That's coming from Makinde. Education tops as Abdulrazak presents a 123.091 billion naira budget to Assembly. You can see that on page 13. Loyalists set up Tinubu's Presidential Campaign Council. You can see that also on page 9. Wandering cult is arrested with members' corpse in Ogun. You can see that story on pages 4 and 5, and that's a very sad story. Also on page 17, Federal government orders telecalls to block SIMs without NINs at December 30. Economic can survive second lockdown. Man NCCI 1. You can see that on page 27. And lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, on page 11, Senate calls President Muhammadu Buhari low, asks President to wake up. And that's all on the Punch. And from there, we'll move straight to the Nation.
And on the Nation newspaper, we have the main story: 17 pupils returned from forest as ACF knocks federal government. The writer says parents seek safe return of boys. A governor raises hope of rescue. Stories above, we have ex-senators, ex-reps press Tinubu to run for president. You can see that on page 6. And on page 25, LCC blames inflation rise on Forex, others. And on page 5, I gave Sanusi the Jonathan medicine, says Ganduje. And lastly, on the front page of the Nation, we have Chief Justice treating COVID-19 in UAE. And that's all we can take on the front pages of the papers this morning. We're moving straight to the newspaper analysis segment, where we'll be joined in by our guest via Zoom. Stay with us as we'll be right back after this break. Ports face total shutdown nationwide. See page 5.
She overwhelmed by security challenges.
Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard. Here on Today in the News,
we read and give in-depth analysis on some of the stories on the front pages of the paper.
also take your insightful comments of what's going on here in Nigeria and across the world. Join us Mondays through to Friday
on Vanguard Live.
Alright, welcome back. If you're just joining, it's still Today in the News on Vanguard Life. My name is Precious Chukudi and we have a guest joining us via Zoom, and he's in the person of Mr. Chris Aditayo. He's a communication expert, communication and public relation expert. Good morning, sir. Good to have you join us. All right, let's just move straight to the front pages. There's a lot of stories making the front page this morning. But we're going to be starting off with the attack in Kankara local government, and this happened last weekend. I don't know if you've been following up with the story, and in the minds of Nigerians, one of the questions they've been asking is, what is it with the reoccurrence, incidents of schools, invasion and abduction of students in the north, and why has decisive actions not been taken to address this trend?
It's unfortunate we're here again, because this has been a recurring theme and incident over the last 5-6 years. One would have expected that we would have met a lot of the chief-up incidents of 2014. Unfortunately, We haven't learned any lesson. Schools are by nature vulnerable environments for attacks by terrorists, and they are even more so when they are boarding schools, as we have seen in the case of the Kankara incident a few days ago. All of this speaks to a failure, a complete collapse, really, of our security architecture and our intelligence gathering abilities. And questions need to be asked of consistently of those at the ends of affairs in the country. Why are Nigerians left so defenseless, regularly under attack by bandits? Kidnapping has become regular up north, and there doesn't seem to be any concerted effort to bring this to an end. The president has refused, despite pleadings and appeals and cajoling by many people, many well-meaning Nigerians, to change the key personnel at the head of our security apparatus. So in essence, complacency has set in, and it's the reason basically why we are where we are, and it's unfortunate.
All right, looking at the level of insecurity plaguing the country. Now, you just made mention of the fact that the president has refused to sack the service chiefs, and one of the things that the presidential aide mentioned was that he hasn't found any reasons yet for the sack of the service chiefs. Now, but in your own context, would you say that these security operatives are inefficient? Because if the president is refusing to sack the service chiefs, does it not mean something different? Hello, Dr. Chris, can you hear me? I don't know, we're not hearing him clearly.
No, we can't hear you.
I think there's something wrong. While we try to still, get across his connection issues, but it's been the question on, every Nigerian's mind, like, okay, the president is not trying to. It doesn't want to sack the service chiefs, and Nigerians have been asking and saying that these service chiefs, they really do lack, they do not have enough ideas anymore. I think we can hear him now. Can you hear me, Mr. Chris?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. As we're saying.
Okay, so like I was saying, if you take a layman's example and say, you employ a security man to serve as a guard in your house, and consistently over 5 years, your house gets burgled, robbers have easy access in and out. Clearly, after one or two incidents, you will take action against, the security man you have employed to provide safety and security for your property. And it's the same thing here, really. If after 5 years, the situation we were in 2015, instead of getting better, has gotten worse, there's really no excuse for keeping the same people, to essentially pretend over serial failure in our security across the country. And so the president's excuse that he hasn't found any reason to change these people does not hold water, with all due respect to the president.
All right, some parents of the Kankara school, abducted school children, are asking the federal government to pay ransom and free the children. Now, in your own opinion, do you think that the government should negotiate with terrorists?
Now, this is a difficult one. Lives cannot be bought, and once lost, they are lost forever. And so the government is in a difficult situation. Unfortunately, it's also the case that when you negotiate with terrorists and you part with money, ultimately what you are encouraging a similar attacks in the future. Having said that, the reality is that the precedence has been set over several years in Nigeria. We've been negotiating with terrorists and kidnappers for so long. We've been paying ransom for so long that there's basically no justification to expect that 300 to 400 kids will be in harm's way, and we will not do all that is required to get them back. And if unfortunately it requires some financial incentives to be exchanged to get these children back, this country owes it to them to do so. It's unfortunate. It's not something that anyone should recommend, but we have found ourselves doing this over and over again, basically because we didn't take care of the basic thing, which is get our intelligence gathering and see the preventive measures that will dissuade kidnapping and terrorist attacks in the first place. And because we haven't taken care of the preventive side, we are forced to have to deal with the curative side, which is where ransom payment comes in. So we just have to do something to get these children back.
Okay, away from that now, let's talk about what happened in Rivers State yesterday. So no fewer than 8 people reportedly died, and many sustained various degrees of injuries in a stampede yesterday morning during the distribution of a Christmas palliative by a non-governmental organization in Rivers. And it happened when a huge crowd turned up to redeem their Christmas palliatives. Now the question is that these people that died and the situation, the crowd yesterday, what does this really say about the current situation in Nigeria in terms of the economy?
Well, it just reaffirms where we are. The World Bank and various other organizations, reputable organizations, have said that Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. And the incident that happened in Port Harcourt, in Rivers, speaks to it, that a stampede arises out of distribution of palliatives. The word palliative itself also speaks to our condition, our predicament. That in essence, we are having to give out. The majority of Nigerians are essentially living like refugees in their own country, having to rely on handouts, quote and unquote palliatives, to basically have a decent meal, maybe once or twice, for a few days, and then they are back to, the difficult life that they have to live in. Our economy is in a shambles at the moment. We can point to COVID-19 and all that, but it was never any good, even before COVID-19 struck. And it's something that our policymakers and development experts need to urgently do something about. We cannot continue to lose people on one hand to terrorism and security failure, and on the other to economic, to the shambolic economy that we currently have. It's even instructive that this happened in Rivers, which is supposedly one of the richest states in Nigeria. It's an oil-rich state. It gets more funds from the federal government than most states across the country. Yet all of that is not trickling down, to the man on the streets. And so any little help that they can get, it starts a stampede, and it's unfortunate.
Okay, so according to an eyewitness yesterday, 8 people died, but according to the information released by the River State Police Command, they said 2 people lost their life, in the stampede. Now this is not the first time that we're hearing this, from different figures. It happened when people lost their life in a particular state in the northern part, and also when people were also kidnapped. We keep hearing different figures. Up to now, there's still different figures coming up. Now, why do you think it's like the right figures are not being passed on to the country? Why do you think it's like Nigerians don't deserve to know the truth? So can you tell us what you think about this whole situation, why we're not getting it?
Why do we always have this? It's simple. Those in the corridors of power, the authorities, want to minimize as much as possible. They want to minimize the catastrophe that's taking place. And this is historical. It's nothing new. If you ask people who are old enough, they will tell you, for instance, that the official figures for the number of people that died during the Nigerian Civil War was just in a few hundred thousands, whereas unofficial figures put them in a couple of millions. And you get that all the time when we have disasters and catastrophes. The government tells you, only a few people died. The man on the street believes, several hundreds of people died. Ultimately, for me, the numbers, whether it is 1 or 10, it's one too many. Even if the government says it's 2 people that died, it's just too many. There's no justification for anyone losing their lives, in search of, a handout. There's just was rising, and people have hope, and people can feed without having to depend on handouts. We will not have lost, the people that we lost in Port Harcourt, and that's really the bottom line.
All right, let's just move on and talk about the 774,000 jobs. I would like to ask you, what do you think of this job program that is, organized by the federal government?
It's one of those funny things where you ask yourself, why is there been so much noise about, less than 1 million jobs that for which duration is only 3 months. They are not permanent jobs. They are temporary jobs, 3 months, and they're supposed to be recruited to clean, cities across the country over a 3-month period, and then they go back into the job market. And yet, even this limited opportunity that could be made available to people across the country has been marred in politics, to the point where 6 months down the line it has not taken off. And it speaks again to how easy it is to politicize everything in this country. The National Assembly wants to have control over who are recruited, for the simple reason that it therefore gives them the opportunity to be able to offer those jobs, to their cronies and acolytes, in their own constituencies. The executive arm, which legitimately has control over who should be recruited, thinks different. And somehow for 6 months we have not even been able to make any movement, on this. 774,000 Nigerians are waiting for a 3-month job. The people in Abuja cannot even seem to quickly agree, and move things forward. It's again another example of the poor leadership that we are currently saddled with in the country.
All right, this job has been, has generated a lot of back and forth with the House of Rep and also the federal government. And the House of Rep has also asked the federal government to suspend the program due to the fact that most Nigerians that submitted their names on the programs have unjustly been excluded. What exactly do you think is panning out now?
Well, I think it's. Number one, there's a lot of opacity. There's lack of clarity in exactly how the government, that's the executive arm, seeks to proceed with the recruitment. The legislature, who have oversight rights and function over a number of things that the executive does. They're well in order to ask for clarity. Where I think that they get it wrong is to insist that they must, be partakers in how the recruitment is done. That really should not be. That's not their role, and they shouldn't. While it's possible that they can pursue the executive to give them some slots and so on and so forth, it should not come to the point where they essentially are refusing to allow the program to move forward. And both sides need to quickly sit down, reach some agreement, and move things forward. Because even if it's for 3 months, at least it will provide some level of comfort and succor to the thousands and millions of Nigerian youths out there who daily are looking for opportunities.
Okay, let's talk about the World Bank that has approved Nigeria's request for 1.5 billion loan. And of course, the World Bank country director for Nigeria said that their engagement will focus on supporting Nigeria's effort to reduce poverty and promote sustained private sector growth. Now, the issue is that it seems many Nigerians are not really in support of these ideas as they've expressed their opinions on social media. They are worried that the money will be mismanaged. Now, with the with the director being involved in this and saying a lot of things, what are the visibly convincing steps that you think they need to take this time around when it comes to this money management?
Well, Nigerian loans have come a long way. We rely a lot on development partners, to provide us financial support to carry out development projects. Unfortunately, history also tells us over the last 2-3 decades that virtually all the loans that we have taken over the years, very few, if any, have ended up delivering on the objectives that they have set for us. Our economy has failed to rise above, its dependence on oil. Despite all the loans that we have collected, our infrastructure pretty much, non-existent at the moment. I can understand why the government goes cap in hand. When we aren't generating enough revenue, there's financial challenges all over and so on. But ultimately, we must also be aware of overburdening the future generation with too many loans, because in essence, what's basically happened when a country takes loan, and right now, when a country takes a loan, is that in essence, it is asking the future generation to pay back what the current generation is going to use, and so on. And if not well managed, what then happens is that the future generation arrives to find humongous loans that for which they can see no benefit. How do we ensure that these funds are better utilized? Well, one of the ways to do so is to ensure that they are tied to developmental productive projects rather than just using such funds to cover overheads like we have been doing in the last several years, where a lot of the loans we get are essentially used to pay for salaries and so on and so forth, and invariably have little or no impact on the economy.
Okay, so IMF and World Bank's loan to Nigeria itself $11.465 billion. Now, do you think in Nigeria we have what it takes to pay back this loan?
Again, do we have what it takes? If you consider all the potentials and the resources that Nigeria, has untapped, yes, we will. But are we in that situation where we are able to tap into all our resources and maximize them for productive benefits? No, we are not. And that's the reason why I say that any loan we obtain should be tied to productive developmental projects for which impact will be seen in the economy, in the bottom line of the economy. If a loan cannot pay its way back, if we take a $1 billion loan from the IMF or the World Bank and it is tied to a development project that cannot pay its way back, that the mathematics doesn't work in such a way that at the end of the day it generates the revenue that will pay back that loan, then it's not worth taking. And that's really the acid test we should have on each one of these loans that we take. If the loans are simply to go and be paying covering overheads, operational expenses, then they are not worth taking.
Okay, now let's just talk a little about what the former president said at Lord Jonathan. He said he was wrongfully judged, by some of his friends and political opponents before 2015 presidential election because of his personal convictions and the vision he had for the country. And he was not only judged; him and his cabinet were also judged. And now, of course, if you follow through what happened before 2015 election, you can actually agree with what he's saying, and saying that he's regretting it now. What do you think about this? And him saying that it seems everybody's changing their mind right now as they are seeing that he had good visions for the country.
Well, hindsight is 2020, like they say. If we look back to where we were 5 years ago, and see where we are now, yes, there's good reason to say that perhaps we would have been better off, staying the course with Goodluck Jonathan in 2015. But we must not run away from the reality that era was also not our finest, era. The security challenges we face now were already major issues as well under Goodluck Jonathan. So it's not like those are great times, for the country. The bigger disappointment really for Nigerians is that having invested so much in the current leadership, the output has been so abysmal as to make it look like the presidency of Goodluck Jonathan, was beneficial to the country in the long term. That's an argument that history will not likely support.
All right, let's just move on and talk about federal government has ordered telcos to disconnect all SIMs not connected to NIN, that's the National Identification Number, and the time span is like from now till on the 30th of this very month, and they are asking that any SIM card that is not connected to the national identity number should be disconnected. Still, there's a lot of questions in the minds of Nigerians, because for them, the federal government is saying that it's a way to checkmate the level of insecurity in the country. But what's your take on it? Do you think that this would, in a way, help to curb the level of insecurity that we're going through in the country?
Will it help? The jury is out on that. Whether attaching NIN numbers to phone numbers will ultimately help. 3-4 years ago, we were told that SIM registration was important to curb insecurity. And so, for instance, MTN was fined a humongous amount of money for not, registering about 500,000 or so subscribers. But that hasn't helped our level of security, despite the fact that virtually all SIMs in the country are now registered. So I with all due respect to the NCC and the ministry, I struggle to see how attaching the NIN number to registered SIM numbers will change, because if you look at the details you put that's required on the NIN number, as well as SIM registration, and indeed for the BVN, they are all largely the same information that you provide, that people are required to provide: their name, local government, age, biometrics, and so on and so forth. So really, what's the big deal about attaching the NIN number to SIM numbers? That's one. Number two, let's grant, without necessarily accepting that it's a necessity, and it will improve security. The question should then be asked: why are we getting only a 2-week notice in the middle of the Yuletide season, when pretty much most things shut down across the country as Christmas and the New Year season catches up on us? Why is the government giving people only 2 weeks? That's for me. It just speaks to how not necessarily long thinking we are about these things. It's just going to be massively impossible to be able to achieve that. And finally, NIN is for Nigerians, but there's a large number of people who live in this country that are not Nigerians and have phone numbers. What are we going to do to them? They are not. Legally they are not required to go register and get NIN numbers. So what are we going to do with them and their phone numbers? Are we just going to yank them off? These are questions that the government needs to to answer and to look deeply into before making the sort of announcement that was made yesterday. I personally don't see how we can achieve, this registration over the next 2 weeks.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Chris Adetayo, a communication and public relations expert. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, I think we need to take this Mr. and Mrs. because I find it quite interesting. Before we go, this is from Mrs. saying, you saw an artificial fingernail in your food. Thank God it hasn't been swallowed. Actually, it was the one from my middle finger. I'm sorry, dear. And Mr. replies, oh my God, how am I sure I haven't eaten something else? Please check your artificial eyelashes. And then, I think it just speaks so much of how women, put so much interest in their beauty and trying to look so pink and, beautiful.
In another way, Mr. is trying to say that, almost all things that ladies use is artificial, and this is not nice. But him also saying, the fingers and all that.
I think we should ask Mr. Chris before he goes. Mr. Chris, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I just took the Mr. and Mrs. I don't know, let me retake it again so that you give us what you think about it. And Mrs. is saying something, saying you saw an artificial fingernail in your food. Thank God it hasn't been swallowed. Actually, it was the one from my middle finger. So I'm sorry, dear. And then Mr. replies and says, oh my God, how am I sure I haven't eaten something else? Please check your artificial eyelashes. What do you make of this situation?
I can see you laughing. Please, I think the volume.
You can't even hear
We
it.
can't hear you. I think you should increase the volume.
Okay, I think you should. We can't hear you clearly.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear what you're saying clearly.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. We can hear you now.
I think the network is.
No, we can
No,
hear
we
you
can
now.
hear you very well.
Can you hear me?
He said he can't hear us.
I think we're having issues, but we'd have really like to take
To get
Mr.
his opinion.
Chris's opinion. But remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen, as well as you can find out up-to-date stories. You can find out what's going on in Nigeria and across the world. You can go straight to our website www.vanguardngl.com to find out more. I remain Precious Chukudi and my co-host. Thank you for watching and have a fabulous day. Ports face total shutdown nationwide. See page 5.
She overwhelmed by security challenges.
Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard. Here on Today in the News, we
read and give in-depth analysis on some of the stories on the front pages of the paper.
also take your insightful comments of what's going on here in Nigeria and across the world. Join us Mondays through to Friday
On Vanguard Live.